I'm Lee Wheeler-Berliner, the Managing Director of the Colorado Workforce Development Council. The Colorado Workforce Development Council is a governor-appointed, business-led, public-private partnership with the purpose to advise, oversee, and integrate the work of the Colorado Talent Development Network. Our vision is that every Colorado employer has access to a skilled workforce, and every Coloradan has the opportunity for meaningful employment, resulting in individual and statewide economic prosperity. We engage with and support the EDCC because we firmly believe that economic development and workforce development go hand in hand, and the two must work together as key partners in order to realize the long-term economic impacts that we want to see within our state.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. My name is Kim Woodworth. I'm the Executive Director for the Economic Development Council of Colorado, otherwise known as EDCC. Just a few housekeeping items before we start. You've all entered into this webinar on mute for recording quality purposes, but that is not how we want you to stay. We encourage you all to ask questions from our presenters today. This is about us getting to know this information, being able to understand the information, and being able to utilize it to the best of our abilities. So please either type your questions into the chat section or raise your hand and we'll answer your question. If you have any questions after the webinar, please send those questions to our administrator at bobby.vandenheuvel@edcconline.org. She's populating the chat section with her email address. We will also follow up with on today's webinar with a link to the webinar and presentation. We will also post it to our website on the webpage dedicated to EDCC's Drive, Lead, Succeed virtual series. And finally, please follow today's discussion on our social media outlets at EDC of Co, and be sure to use the hashtags DLS2022 and EDCC events so that we can follow you. For those of you who are new to us today, which we have a lot of folks that are new, EDCC is a statewide industry association that supports economic development efforts across the state of Colorado. We connect our communities, our members, and our partners to high quality educational opportunities and trusted resources, and advocate for sound policies and programs that support a vibrant economy and enhance quality of life for all of Colorado. EDCC members come from a variety of settings. We are rural and urban. We are public and private sector, for-profit and not-for-profit, and include individual communities, counties, and regional organizations, local and state government, chambers of commerce, universities, and private industry. EDCC has built a virtual arsenal of information to keep our professionals updated on the latest trends, data, and case studies and thought leadership papers that our professionals can take back to their local leaders to begin these important discussions at the local level. Make this feature a part of your ongoing professional development and tool that you can use to help inform, educate, and transform your community. We'd like to take a quick moment to share with you our 2022 events and programming lineup. Our signature event is actually coming up here in October, and hope that we all see you attend this event. I'd like to see a show of hands. We're going to actually use our emojis and our hand raising. How many people have been to Pueblo, Colorado in the last 10 years? Okay, what about the last 5 years? And all right, how about recently? All right. Well, that's why I'm very excited to tell you that Pueblo has done some of the greatest work that I've ever seen. And I am so excited about this conference this year. They have taken a lot of legacy infrastructure and have turned it into amazing spaces. They are very excited to show their community to you. And so we really do hope that you join us this October 19th through the 21st. And Bobby's gonna drop in the link to our events page here where you can then register for the event. All right, I'm done with my business. So without further ado, let's move on to today's programming that is brought to you by the Colorado Workforce Development Council. We can't thank the CWDC enough for their continued support for EDCC's pursuit in tackling Colorado's most perplexing economic issues and finding solutions that can be utilized at the local level. Thanks to disruptions and shortages, the term supply chain has become an everyday topic of conversation. But what exactly is a supply chain? How do you define it, conceptualize it, respond to it, and what resources are available to assist you in this process? In this virtual session, experts from NIST-MEP, Manufacturer's Edge, and Sustainment will discuss trends and best practices for across the country, and companies strive to strengthen their supply chains by adopting strategies like reshoring and clustering, as well as technical solutions like mapping and matchmaking to help them meet customer demand, maintain production, and stay afloat. The goal of this event is to arm our economic development professionals with the background, context, data, and resources that can be leveraged in order to help attract, retain, and expand your manufacturing base. I'd like to introduce to you today Rob Newbold. He's the Director of Client Services at Manufacturer's Edge. Rob has an extensive background in manufacturing in both wind and solar industries. And just recently, he was the Regional Director at IMEC Illinois, which is part of the MEP network, which we're going to learn more about. We are very fortunate to have Rob and here in Colorado now using his experience and talent with Manufacturer's Edge. Let's go ahead and give Rob a big Zoom welcome by using your Zoom emojis, hand clap, do whatever, but let's give Rob a big warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Kim, and it's so great to be here and be part of not only part of Colorado, but part of this effort to really improve the supply chain and respond to the disruptions that are out there. And we're excited to be here as Manufacturer's Edge to help pull together some great experts. I am not a supply chain expert, but we'll give a shot and give you a high-level overview of what's happening sort of in the supply chain and how economic developers play an integral role, I think, in the future of improving the supply chain. So thank you for scrolling through. Let's go on to that next slide after that. So I want to give you just a real high-level understanding, and let's just start out with the elephant in the room, and that is supply chain disruptions is a big deal. We knew that going into COVID that there were that the supply chains were struggling. I won't say that they were as smooth as identified as we'd like them to be, but it was immediate and a very apparent as soon as 2020 started. The tenuous hold on what was happening in supply chains just fell apart. And so what we're now dealing with are the trends left from that disruption, and how do we pick up the pieces and move forward and help identify future support for manufacturers that are going to meet the client needs that are out there. So there's 6 things listed here, and we could go and spend hours on each one of these. But these are 6 trends that I think that you're going to hear more about today as we go through the conversations as elements of the supply chain that can be addressed. And so one recent story, we had a great session recently with some manufacturers around logistics. And I thought it was really interesting that one manufacturer came up to me afterwards and said, you know, I was buying this equipment 2.5 years ago, and to ship it to me, it was about $10,000. When I went to buy that equipment just earlier this year, the price had jumped to over $30,000, right? And that's an example of some of the logistics issues that have occurred, some of the just issues that manufacturers are dealing with. Not only are there price increases for materials and production delays because of not able to get materials, but there is this huge logistics cost impact as well. And then you multiply that out with improved investments. Many companies are taking investments in technology because that workforce is so tenuous and unable to get that workforce and labor in place. So we've got a lot of mixed things happening. And if we move to the next slide, then Kim will talk just a little bit about why this is important and who Manufacturers Edge is, as well as NIST-MEP in playing a role in this. So across the country, Congress in 1986 created this structure for how to help small and mid-sized manufacturers. And so the MEP National Network has one center like Manufacturers Edge in every state. And we're going to hear from our partners at the federal level. This is a collaborative approach, a collaborative grant agreement between the federal government, U.S. Department of Commerce through a NIST and then to the MEP program that helps support small and mid-sized manufacturers across the country. And so Kim mentioned that I was at IMEC in Illinois previously. Now I'm here at Manufacturers Edge, and we try and bring great understanding of the issues that surround manufacturing so that we can help through consulting and training and coaching and resource development to improve their businesses on a daily basis. You'll hear more about that from NIST-MEP, so I won't cover this slide anymore, but it's a great partnership, and within this national network, there are thousands of resources that we can pull from. So moving on, there we go. I just wanted to give a quick overview for those of you who may not quite know how to define supply chain and give you a couple of options. And so supply chain is really that ability to take a sequence of processes involved in the production and distribution of a commodity, right? You don't just go to the store and buy a loaf of bread. There has to be a whole chain of things that happen prior to your purchase of that bread. And so there's two ways to think about it as the chain, which is what that top definition is. But I think a more apt definition is the network, because it's not a one step at a time process. Multiple processes, multiple systems, multiple information flows are all coming together at one time to help move that commodity to an actual product. And manufacturing is only one step of that. There's multiple levels. And I think it's important for us to see it as a much bigger system, because in that system, we can start breaking down elements of it to understand and improve and impact. And so if we move to the next slide, you can just see a very high level picture of what a supply chain is. We often think about supply chain more just from the manufacturer side, but the supply chain starts way back in who's providing level 1, level 2, even level 3 and 4 supplies to that manufacturer. And as you're looking at this, the materials flow from the left to the right all the way to the customer, but the information flows the other way. And sometimes that information flow gets broken and it doesn't move as quickly, and the system gets clogged up. And so we have to take and think about each one of these processes as one step in the chain of activities that happen for manufacturers. So at a high level, it seems simple, but when you start breaking it down, it becomes a complex, multifaceted, highly risky approach to serving that customer. And then not only do you take it from, I need the material at my location in Colorado, where am I going to get it in Colorado? Now we start taking it to a national level and even to a global level. And the risks multiply, the ability to get material on a timely basis and be productive, the ability to get material in a cost-effective manner. These are all things that small and medium-sized and even large manufacturers have struggled with tremendously over the last few years. So as we move to the next slide, I just wanted to kind of set some of the terms of why supply chain is so important and supply networks are so important to manufacturers. Most manufacturers are looking at, number one, how do I get the supplies that I need, the materials that I need, as cost effectively as possible? And so cost becomes number one. But in order for us to manage the complexity and the uncertainties of a supply chain in today, we also have to think about this from a total cost of ownership. And I think you'll hear more about that as we go along. It's not just what does the part cost, it is how much is the cost of the risk in order to have my supplies come from China versus Malaysia, from Taiwan versus Australia, from New York versus Montrose, right? And so we have to look about it as a much more deep and rich set of data in order to understand total cost of ownership of that piece and how that applies to your product. The whole starting point of a supply chain is what goes into the product I'm creating. We call that a bill of materials. And if you only look at the cost effectiveness of one of those pieces at a time, you aren't going to take a look at the whole cost effectiveness of your supply chain. And so it's important for us to really think about the efficiency and productivity. The quality plays a huge part, especially in aerospace, which is such a big industry here in Colorado. If those parts don't meet spec, it puts not only the flyers at risk, but the people that are serving those flyers at risk as well. And so we're always looking at and have to look at the resilience and how do we reduce risk. So as we're moving to that next stage, that next slide, it's important to also recognize there's differences between how large manufacturers manage their supply chains and how small to mid-sized manufacturers have influence over their supplier networks. So as you can see here, the buying power of a large manufacturer to be able to influence prices is tremendous. And again, from a recent conversation we have heard that that chips are such a big part, electronic chips, being able to get those electronic parts from Asia has been a huge impact, not only to the automotive industry, but to smaller manufacturers as well. And so if the government says that you have to buy chips from the US, but what we're hearing most recently is that chip supply has already been purchased multiple months in advance by large manufacturers. And so small manufacturers having a real hard time buying those electronic pieces. And so when the capital is tied up in materials and they have to do big buys in ahead of price fluctuations, it just really puts a crimp on the small manufacturer. They often don't have very strong policies and able to think about the policies surrounding their supply chain, how they make choices. It's often the owner making a choice on, hey, let's go buy that steel or those parts right away. And they're also playing multiple roles versus a large manufacturer who may have very dedicated staffs to help look at where the trends are and how to buy ahead. So multiple ways that small and large manufacturers have different approaches to managing their supply chain. What does all that mean to you? Let me go to the next slide and we'll share just a little bit. What you're going to hear today, I think, is some of the newer ways that not only the trends are showing that manufacturers can approach the supply networks, but what policies that can help influence that and improve that resiliency of the supply network over time. And so we're going to talk a little bit from a state and national level. You're going to talk a little bit from how a community can have a role in the supply chain, and then how manufacturers can see the resources that are available to them to be able to be supported through their supply chain disruptions. So Kim, I think that opens up the first step. And I want to take just a minute to introduce one of our friends from the National NIST-MEP Center. And his name is Nico Thomas. And we've worked with Nico for 3 or 4 years, probably, since he's been with the National Institute of Standards and Technology MEP program. So take it away, Nico.
Greetings, everybody. Hope you can hear me well. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today to talk about such a significant issue that's facing both Colorado and our nation, and that is the issue of supply chains. So I really appreciate the introduction. My name is Nico Thomas. I am a performance analyst with the Program Evaluation and Economic Research Group of NIST-MEP. I'm joined by my colleague, Mark Schmidt, who is the Chief of Regional State and Partnership Division at NIST-MEP, and he'll be speaking a bit later. So I think, we had a nice introduction of what we'll be able to talk about today. And we're going to talk, about supply chain, get into the data, and we'll dig into that a little bit more. But first, let's start with a brief introduction of who Mark and I work for, NIST-MEP, and the MEP National Network, which Manufacturers Edge is a part of. So the MEP National Network comprises the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, the 51 MEP centers located in all 50 states and Puerto Rico, MEP Advisory Board, MEP Center boards, as well as over 1,400 trusted business advisors and experts at approximately 450 MEP service locations. And each MEP center is a partnership between the federal government and a variety of public or private entities, including state, university, and nonprofit organizations. And our national network strength is in its partnerships. Through its collaborations at the federal, state, and local level, MEP centers work with manufacturers to develop new products and customers, expand and diversify markets, adopt new technology, and enhance value within supply chains. The MEP program serves as a bridge to other organizations and federal research labs that share a passion for enhancing the manufacturing community. So can we move to the next slide, please? I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide because Rob already went through it. But as Rob mentioned, we have a center in every state plus Puerto Rico, including Manufacturers Edge right here in Colorado. Each center is a partnership between the federal government and a variety of public or private entities, again, which can include state, university, or nonprofit organizations. So we have a presence all across the country. So moving forward, we'll talk a little bit about the services that we provide. So MEP centers and partners have developed a wide range of services and initiatives to enable manufacturers to identify opportunities that can accelerate and strengthen growth and competitiveness in their global marketplace. These are a representative example of some of the services available at MEP centers across the country. But today we're going to focus a little bit more on supply chains and resilience opportunities that happen across MEP National Network. One of the key learnings from the pandemic is that manufacturing customers of all types have a dramatically heightened level of concern over where products and their entire supply chains come from. This presents a significant opportunity for American manufacturers to diversify what they make and who they make it for. And in the process, manufacturers will diversify their customer base and make their relationship to the competitive market more resilient to future disruptions. So for example, manufacturers leveraged their capabilities and pivoted from legacy products to making gowns, masks, swabs, tubes, or other high demand items. Similar opportunities now exist for a wide variety of materials, components, and products across most supply chains. Automotive companies that are concerned over their supply chains for certain semiconductor chips are strategically examining their supply chains to anticipate where the next points of failure may occur in production levels. And MEP centers present a key opportunity for exploring strategic planning and improvement in how companies access vendors and customers. So we at MEP engage with manufacturing supply chains in at least 3 ways. One is we have a supplier scouting program that identifies and connects suppliers with purchasers, responding to specific needs by individual companies. Centers around the country are also working with manufacturers to map their supply chains and populate supplier databases, which will enable us to identify required capabilities and potential vulnerabilities. And then our centers also provide cybersecurity training for our manufacturers across the country, which can help make them more resilient to disruption from cyber attacks. So we see supply chain resilience and security as an integral part to US manufacturers' competitive advantage. But let's unpack the supply chain issue just a little bit more. So we move forward 1 slide. The pandemic sent numerous shockwaves through the world of small and mid-sized manufacturers, and perhaps the most lasting have been disruptions and changes in the global supply chain. These disruptions go all the way back to the beginning stages of the pandemic. Factories were hit hard by the virus cases, which caused many factories to shut down or reduce production because workers were sick or in lockdown. In response, shipping companies cut their schedules in anticipation of a drop in demand for moving goods around the world. However, demand for some goods skyrocketed while demand for other products disappeared virtually overnight. And so this surge in demand clogged the system for transporting goods to the factories that needed them. And at the same time, finished products piled up in warehouses and at ports throughout the country because of a profound shortage of shipping containers. So this is all a process where one piece of the global supply chain can really throw off the entire supply chain across the globe. So we can move forward to the next slide. These disruptions globally have led to significant pressure on the global supply chain. So what we're looking at here is an index which the Federal Reserve Bank of New York publishes, which measures how much pressure there is in the global supply chain. This index tracks the state of the global supply chains using data from the transportation and manufacturing sectors. And what we're seeing here in the data is that for much of the pandemic, supply chains have faced significantly higher pressure than at any time in recent decades. After reaching a high in December 2021, the pressure has began falling slowly. But if you look at where we are in July of 2022, it's still significantly higher than where we've been in the past. So what does this mean domestically? And we'll get into that in the next slide. In short, global supply chain pressures lead to domestic disruptions. Shortly after the start of the pandemic, the US Census Bureau put together a small business pulse survey to measure the effect of changing business conditions during the coronavirus pandemic on our nation's small businesses. The pulse survey provides a near real-time look at the situation that businesses face as data is collected from small businesses on operational challenges, vaccine requirements, supply chain impact, outlook and expectations, and much more. There is in that pulse survey a specific question, which is highly relevant to our discussion, which is the question of whether companies have experienced domestic delays in the recent past. And according to the most recent data release, nearly 45% of US-based businesses have had domestic supplier delays in the past week. So 45% is significant, but when you break down the responses by industry, the challenge gets even more interesting. As you can see, the US manufacturing industry is the industry that has been hit the hardest, with 70% of US manufacturers, or 71%, who responded during the most recent reporting period that they have had recently experienced domestic supplier delays. Retail trade, construction, and accommodation and food services have also had significant delays, but none as significant as for the US manufacturing industry. So we can move forward. The disruption to US manufacturers have been growing over time, with the disruptions differing in significance from region to region. For example, when looking from year to year in the US, the disruptions to the domestic supply chain grew from 50% of respondents in 2020 to 55% in 2021, and then jumped significantly to 71% in 2022, I'm sorry. However, in Colorado, only 34% of respondents reported disruptions in 2020, which jumped to 71% in 2021 and to nearly 80% in 2022. So manufacturers in Colorado have been hit even harder by domestic supply disruptions than what we're even seeing at the national level. So they need some help. You can move forward to the next slide. The supply chain pressures and disruptions are being felt in many ways, such as the rapidly increasing prices that both domestic producers and consumers are facing. The US Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks both the Consumer Price Index and the Producer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index is a measure of the average change over time in the prices paid by consumers for goods and services. And the Producer Price Index measures the average change over time in the selling prices received by domestic producers of goods and services. So the Producer Price Index measures the price change from the perspective of the seller. So what we're looking at is that over the last 12 months, the Consumer Price Index for all items increased 9.1% for the year ending in June 2022. That's just a 1-year change. That's a significant jump in prices for the consumer. And it's not just a jump in prices for the consumer. We're seeing even more significant jumps in prices for the producers. So the Producer Price Index has fared even worse, with the PPI for the final demand increasing by 11.3% for the year ending in June 2022. Specifically, the producer prices for goods rose 17.9%, which is the largest advance since they've started collecting this 12-month rolling data around the Producer Price Index. So it's a huge jump. And as you can tell by looking at the significant growth in these charts in recent years, these fast increases in prices are unlike any we've seen in recent times. So what are contributing to these disruptions and to these price increases? We can talk about that a bit on the next slide. One element that is definitely contributing to supply chain disruptions is the lack of workforce. While a fast pivot to growth is good news for businesses and for workers, it also creates challenges. Entire industries that shrank dramatically during the pandemic, such as the hotel and restaurant sectors, are now trying to reopen. Some businesses report that they've been unable to hire quickly enough to keep pace with their rising need for workers, leading to all-time highs in job openings. Using the US Bureau of Labor Statistics job openings and labor turnover survey, JOLTS data, we can see that the job openings are at levels that we have never seen in the past 20 years. And this is true for both the US and individual states such as Colorado. So you can see Colorado here on the left and the US data there on the right. And you see the trends are very similar. You see the same growth, decline, and then the rapid growth between 2020, 2021, and 2022. There are a significant amount of job openings right now, and it's difficult to find the workforce to fill those job openings. And without filling the job openings, manufacturers cannot ramp up production and capacity, but they just don't have the staff. So they're unable to do that, and they're limited in what they're able to produce and how they're able to ramp up and respond to the increasing demand. So we can move forward. Another element of the supply chain disruption stemmed from US company reliance on foreign sourcing. NIST-MEP recently published an infographic on the reshoring challenge, highlighting the need to bring back manufacturing to the United States. Relying on foreign sourcing has led to significant risks, especially when global supply chain pressures are high. Global supply chains often require a product to pass through several countries before reaching the US. A delay or disruption in any one of those countries can therefore cause supply problems for companies in the US. And we have experienced this problem firsthand through the pandemic. The US Department of Health and Human Services, for example, has shown that 95% of surgical masks and 70% of tighter fitting respirators, such as N95 masks, are made overseas. And then according to the FDA, nearly 3/4 of active ingredient manufacturing facilities for medicines sold in the US are also located in other countries. So there's a significant portion of very critical products and industries that are just outsourced and that are susceptible to risks around the global supply chain. And the pandemic was found, as an example, to have affected 98%, nearly all of global supply chains. So you really can't avoid it. The good news is that manufacturers now understand the need to reshore. They understand its importance. A recent Thomas Industrial survey found that 70% of firms surveyed were likely to reshore in coming years. And according to Forbes, discussions on supply chain shifts are getting more attention than ever before during the corporate presentations. Discussions of onshoring, discussions of reshoring, discussions of nearshoring. They're at the highest levels that we've ever seen in terms of importance to CEOs of major manufacturing companies. So that is good news. And there's more good news, and we'll talk about that on the next slide as it relates to reshoring. And that good news is that there is evidence of companies following through with reshoring. We can move forward. Thank you. So companies are starting to follow through with reshoring. A recent report in 2021 found that the private and federal push for domestic supply of essential goods propelled reshoring and foreign direct investment job announcements to a record of 261,000 in 2021, which is significantly higher than at any point over the past decade. The high rate of 2020 and 2021 reshoring versus federal foreign direct investment also indicates that the US headquarters companies are starting to understand the same benefits to localized production that many foreign companies have understood over the last decade. The report also includes some data by state showing that Colorado ranks 28th as a state when it comes to attracting reshoring companies, bringing back nearly 10,000 jobs to the state since 2010. However, there's still a big opportunity in Colorado to attract more companies that are reshoring, and that remains an opportunity for economic developers such as yourself and for MEP, NIST-MEP Manufacturer's Edge to help attract those companies to Colorado and to other states across the country. So we can move forward to the next slide. Thank you very much. But while reshoring is good, we cannot forget about our small manufacturers who make up a significant portion of the US supply chain. In the US, 98.9% of US manufacturing establishments have less than 500 employees. 91% of manufacturers have less than 100 employees, and 69% of manufacturers have less than 20 employees. And these manufacturing establishments that have less than 500 employees, what we would call small or medium-sized, employ over 70% of all manufacturing employees in the United States. So they are a critical element to the global supply chain and to the US economy. And in Colorado, small manufacturers comprise even more of the industry than nationally. 99.4% of Colorado manufacturing establishments have less than 500 employees. 96% of manufacturers in Colorado have less than 100 employees, and 78% of manufacturers have less than 20 employees. And those manufacturers, those small and medium-sized manufacturers, employ 75% of all Colorado manufacturing employees. So working with these smaller manufacturers to improve productivity and competitiveness represents another way to offset supply chain pressures, whether it's introducing new technology to these manufacturers to shorten the gap between the larger manufacturers and the smaller ones and their ability to be resilient, whether it's helping them with workforce challenges to make sure that their workforce is resilient, or whether it's helping them understand where they fit in this global supply chain as a smaller manufacturer, where they fit in the regional supply chain and in the domestic supply chain as well. There represents a huge opportunity to work with those smaller manufacturers. And that's NIST-MEP and the MEP National Network's target market, those small to mid-sized manufacturers that have less than 500 employees. So if we can move forward to the last slide that I'll be talking to, and then I'll transition to my coworker, Mark Schmidt. Thank you very much. So understanding the challenges of small to mid-sized manufacturers and helping them overcome those challenges is where MEP comes in and where economic developers can play a huge role as well. As MEP serves small and medium-sized manufacturers, we capture intelligence on the challenges these companies are facing. Nationally, the only challenges that have grown as an MEP client challenge over the past 10 years were employee recruitment and retention, workforce, managing partners and suppliers, supply chain, and technology needs, which is adoption of technology or introducing advanced technology into the manufacturer. Employee recruitment and retention grew the most and is the top challenge faced by MEP clients. And it's the first time they've overcome and become the top challenge that we've seen. Managing partners and suppliers grew the second most, with over 20% of MEP clients now highlighting this as a top challenge that they face. And in Colorado, we're seeing similar trends. So the only challenges that have grown as a manufacturer's edge client challenge over the past 10 years were, again, employee recruitment and retention, managing partners and suppliers, but Manufacturer's Edge also captured two other opportunities, which are identifying growth opportunities and exporting and global engagement. So in Colorado, employee recruitment and retention grew the most significantly, going from being reported by 38% of clients in fiscal year 2012 to over 68% of clients in the most recent fiscal year. So that is a significant jump of over 30%. So these challenges help us understand where we can create the most impact for US manufacturers. And we would like to think that with great challenges come great opportunities. So I will now pass it to my colleague, Mark Schmidt, who will discuss the path forward a bit more. So over to you, Mark.
Nico, thank you very much. Thank you for Kim for the opportunity to talk today and talk a little bit about some of the things we're working on or looking at from the national level in regard to supply chain. If you hit the next slide, please. I think the two things I want to lead with here today are that although the world, although the country, although Colorado, although your communities, right, you may have right problems or define problems in lots of different ways. Manufacturing itself is not really one of them, and I think it's our jobs, our collective job to make sure that there is a robust manufacturing base and robust manufacturers who are actually solving a lot of the problems that exist around the world. I think the other thing I want to talk to a little bit today, the old adage from the 1976 movie, All the President's Men, follow the money a little bit, right? In terms of economic developers, these are kind of unprecedented times in some ways, in terms of federal money that's available, that's out, that exists to bring to bear for small businesses, small manufacturers, wherever they happen to be, including in Colorado. And you certainly can't read the newspaper. We read the same newspapers. Everyone's talking about supply chain. Everyone's talking about workforce. So what are some of the things that we can do to maybe mitigate some of that at the individual manufacturing level is what I want to hit next. If you hit the next slide for me, please. I think it's important to look around the big world. What's happening in terms of global changes, in terms of, I know, relevant to Colorado space exploration. What's happening in terms of national defense? Where's the money going? What pharma, obviously, and medical devices coming off 2 years of pandemic and the importance of that. The emergence of electric vehicles, the emergence of the infrastructure needed for electric vehicles, and how that's going to change some of the landscape and some of the businesses. One thing we do is follow what is happening on Capitol Hill. Where is money being appropriated, right? And if you look around now, infrastructure, clean energy, semiconductors, right? That's where there's some large investments. And then, coming out of the White House recently, it was just a lot of push to buy America, buy, the federal agencies have a little pressure to look domestically for sources of supply. And I would also think in Colorado, at the state level, at your town level, what are those government people buying, right? I don't know why when I was thinking about Colorado, I was thinking about the need for, right, the need for snow plows and plows and things like that. Can we look around and find out, are there domestic sources to even help state governments and buy American kinds of things if they have those pressures and those policies on them. Next slide, please. Ultimately, ultimately for us at the federal level, and then at the local and community level, Really, it's about making change at individual companies. And so as economic developers, I think maybe it was Rob who said this a little bit earlier. You know, there are, we'll call them the larger companies, the OEMs, the tier ones, the tier twos, right? They have a need to buy supply. They have, right, in order to get their products to their customers, they need a supply base, right? So those OEMs are always looking for new and different sources of supply. Those OEMs are always looking to make their current supply base operate a little bit more efficiently, always looking for their suppliers to be competitive. And I think in understanding what's driving some of the OEMs, or knowing what's driving their business, as economic developers, underneath that, if we're talking to a supplier to that OEM, I think we have a better chance of making some change at that supplier level. And then the symbioticness of just the way things work. The small and medium-sized manufacturers in Colorado are always looking for new customers, new markets, new places to sell, right? So getting in the middle of what the bigger companies are doing and what the smaller companies need, I think provides an opportunity for us, the collective us, to do more convening. And I think Brett's going to maybe hit on some of this a little bit later, but I think there's real opportunity to connect businesses to other businesses, and connect businesses to federal and state buying opportunities as well. And I know from the national perspective, one of the words we're going to lean on in terms of supply chain going forward is convening and connecting. Can we connect small and medium-sized manufacturers with business opportunities they didn't know about before? Simultaneously, can we be working with the federal agencies, working with some of the OEMs in tier ones, to connect them to new and different sources of supply for what they need and what they want to do? Next slide, please. And I think what I want to leave you with is I think if we're going to make a difference, all the things that Nico talked and some of the supply chain pressures and whatnot, I'd like to think we're all in this together somehow. If we are going to make change, if we are going to keep manufacturing competitive, it's going to rely on your ability to work with us and our ability to work with you. It's going to take all the resources, the economic development resources, kind of working in concert to make sure that the supply base here in the United States, there in Colorado, is as robust and as agile as it could possibly be. And I do believe that we are all in this together to make change. That is who we are. That is just a quick snapshot of how to get a hold of us. But again, I think there's opportunities for us as economic developers to connect companies to each other, as well as to other different kinds of buyers. And if nothing else, if I can leave you with that, that's what I'll leave you with.
Mark, thank you, and Nico both. Yeah, we really appreciate you being here. And Kim alluded to this. They're both in Alaska right now, visiting with one of our sister MEPs up there as well. So I know that they've got some other commitments. Hopefully you can stick around for a little while, but appreciate your insights. And I think it really leads us then to think about how do we, as Mark just said, how do we start making those connections? How do we start making convening opportunities for small to mid-sized manufacturers to see what other opportunities there are for finding clients. And so I want to introduce the co-founder and CEO of Sustainment, one of our newest partners here in Colorado. And his name is Brett Boyd. And so Brett, would you come on and share just a little bit about what Sustainment is and where it's headed?
Yeah, no, you got it. And I appreciate the opportunity to meet you all. And I really appreciate the setup here. I think there are a lot of the themes that we have discussed up to this point that flow right into a discussion of where we're going and how we want to enable the ecosystem to get there. So yeah, look, as Rob mentioned, my name is Brett. I lead a business called Sustainment. Our website is sustainment.tech. So we are a public benefit corporation specifically designed around the mission of enabling the small and medium American manufacturer, like full stop. Like this is what we are trying to do, is build a technology platform and apply technology to help small and medium manufacturers, which as Nico pointed out, like when we talk about American manufacturing, we are talking about small and medium manufacturers. Right? Like we all know, the big brands in aviation and automotive and so on. I mean, the average aviation company has about 12,000 suppliers. Average automotive company has about 18,000 suppliers. These are the community-led small and medium businesses that we all engage with. And, and again, like it's a massive industry. 12% of GDP, 11% of employment in the United States. But again, at kind of the tip of the spear, really what we are talking about is are the small businesses that sit in all of your respective communities here. So we have this industry that, as a result of a variety of different things that have happened around, outsourcing and offshoring and all of these things that have happened over the last generation or so that we're very aware of. This community is unfortunately fragmented in the sense that there are all of these different kind of little silos of manufacturing and different communities of manufacturing in different pockets of the country. But when we look at this, we really just see like a whole, almost untapped capacity to grow U.S. manufacturing and to grow it through the power of this network. Right. When you look at prior times in U.S. history, when we were the world leader in manufacturing, and when you look at the way some of the other manufacturing ecosystems work in other parts of the world, one of our observations is that none of this happens in silos. In almost all occasions, you actually see a high degree of connectivity between the entire supply chain, from the tier 1 to the tier 2, all the way down to the tier 5 machine shop building repair parts. You see tight integration between workforce and education. So the technical training is highly connected to the actual shop floor, what those folks are trying to do. And you see all these other great enabling resources at the economic development and those types of tiers, all kind of connected. So there's one common base of information that everybody is operating from. And our observation, really our founding thesis for why we built this business is that there needs to be that information layer in the United States to bring the ecosystem together. And really we see this as an opportunity to empower all of the different stakeholders who are contributing to this so that we can leverage some of the outsized effects of your work. So again, as I mentioned, I actually sit in Austin, and from Colorado, Alaska, and Austin, I suspect I have the worst weather of anybody here. But candidly, actually, a lot of our investors and a decent part of our team actually sits in the great state of Colorado. So we're excited about this. What I'd like to do for the next couple of minutes is show you a little bit of the technology that we've built and talk at a high level around how we're thinking about applying this in Colorado in partnership with Manufacturer's Edge. I'm going to do a disclaimer that I'm going to probably spend 5 minutes or so on this. The purpose of this is really not to do a full demo. That will come here in upcoming months, and we'll provide opportunities for how you can get access to some of these different tools and so on. But I just wanted to show a little bit of what this looks like, what's possible, and what is coming. So allow me to share my screen here, please. So where I'm at right now is I'm inside what we call the Sustainment portal. So if any manufacturer, this is a free experience for manufacturers. So any manufacturing supplier here, anywhere in the supply chain, can go to our website, sustainment.tech, and they can create a free account, and they're inside this experience. And inside this experience, they can do a couple of different things. I'll just highlight a few, but they can build their company's, essentially a profile to showcase their business, which I'll show you here in a second. They can access opportunities. They can find peers and supporting resources on a map. They can communicate, and they can do some other tools to connect with local partners, customers, and suppliers. And also relevant is, based on this, based on my location, my industry expertise, and what I do as a manufacturer, I also have kind of front and center some of the supporting organizations that exist to help me that I may not know of or may not have connectivity to. So I've set this up. We've got a Sustainment profile set up in Texas here. So I'm seeing Texas-based organizations. But again, think of this as like everybody has a structured way to present who they are and what they do. That goes down to specific sub-process levels of certifications and so on. Everyone has access to their local community of manufacturers. So again, as a free service, one of our observations is that Google is horrible for helping these companies find suppliers and materials providers and partners and so on, which is very much the case in this dynamic manufacturing ecosystem. So as a manufacturing supplier, I can go in here and I can see a list of different types of manufacturers. I can search by capability. I can go see these companies and say, okay, this is a company that I might want to be a partner with. I can connect with them. I can message with them. I can securely share technical data in a way that is compliant with modern cybersecurity requirements. And so I can have a technology-enabled experience as a manufacturer to reach into my local ecosystem. Now, for you all, we've built a way, and this looks similar, but I'm now in a different environment here, where this is basically a way for ecosystem partners like you all to reach into the ecosystem. Say, hey, I'm not a manufacturing supplier, but I have just the same need to understand who my manufacturers are, to see what they do, to help them make connections with new customers and new partners, to run reports so I can quickly, say, hey, give me a PDF of all the, women-owned suppliers that work in oil and gas in our area. And again, I can have a technology-enabled experience where I can go do my work, and I can go say, looking at Denver, who are the manufacturers in some radius of Denver or of wherever I happen to be, and I can go look and I can identify these businesses. And again, as we build out the network here in the state of Colorado, we'll have more and more manufacturers here who will be more and more visible to, I'm just kind of picking a company at random here, but we can see these companies, see what they do, see their specialties. See some of the pictures that this company has uploaded here, see some of their certifications, potentially identify areas where, their certification could, potentially support a partner, or where their experience could allow them to access a new opportunity, and so on. But we've got a whole suite of tools here around lists to organize your manufacturers, the reminders to invite them to different events and so on. Notes, almost like an Evernote, where you can kind of share institutional knowledge within your team around different manufacturers, where you can connect, you can engage with them, and so on. So again, more to follow on this, and we look forward to doing a more comprehensive demo as we roll this out, again in partnership with Manufacturer's Edge. But do think of like just free resources to help use technology to bring the ecosystem together. Now, it still requires your expertise, to work through and build relationships and coach and teach and mentor and support these businesses to come together. but we hope to enable to do that through technology. And another part of what we were building here, we actually kind of grew up as a supplier to the Air Force, who said, look, we, the Department of Defense, have a massive challenge to onboard tens of thousands of new manufacturers into the defense industrial base in upcoming years. And so they're actually working through the same challenge of, how do we find, how do we communicate with, and how do we onboard and evaluate new suppliers for different parts requirements. So look forward to talking through all of that in additional detail. And as a last comment, I just would, say, like, be encouraged, please. Like this whole manufacturing industry, which is so existential to us, is it is coming back. Like I have absolute conviction that the U.S. manufacturing economy will grow in upcoming decades. I think on the one hand, what we've seen over the past few years is really we've seen the fracturing of the fully outsourced global supply chain model. I think we've demonstrated that broke, and that companies need to start costing in and planning in resilience and localization as they think about what they're doing with their supply chains. COVID and boats getting stuck in Suez Canal and so on, likely accelerated that. But I think that is a long-term structural shift that we in the United States are going to benefit from as companies look to localize supply chains to control some of those things. And then second, if you follow some of the technology trends in the industry, one of the things that one of these great terms, Industry 4.0, which is one of these things that can kind of mean whatever you want it to mean. So people use it in a lot of different ways, but just think about this idea of, as more software and automation and artificial intelligence and really capability come into the technology and software in the manufacturing space, you're really seeing like more capable equipment, more requirement for higher skilled, higher trained, higher paid operators. And you're essentially diminishing the economic advantage of offshoring. As low cost labor is less a part of the overall equation of a built part. You shift the economic dynamic of this, towards more controlled, more localized supply chains that are closer to your end customer markets. And that's a thing. Like that's a thing that is happening now, will continue to happen over the next 20 or 30 years, so long as you believe that this technology thing is real and will continue to happen. And again, I would just say, like, be encouraged, because these are just great opportunities to help our businesses and our communities grow on the foundation of American manufacturing. So thanks, y'all. I look forward to questions.
Brett, that is a great, hopeful statement and approach, and we are so excited to be partnering with you on bringing sustainment to Colorado and help starting to make that convening and those kind of conversations happen more effectively. But at the same time, we also have to think and tie in a little bit around some of the policies and the approaches that are out there. And what Brent mentioned is there's sort of a fragmented approach to not only manufacturers, but to some extent, how the state and the local organizations work in collaboration. And so with us today is Jennifer Hagendier, our Vice President and COO of Manufacturers Edge, to talk a little bit about the Colorado Manufacturing Network and how that looks in the future. So, Jennifer? I'm not hearing you yet.
Got it. Better now?
Better now. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. I had to check the time zones to see what time it was. And then that picture was me 10 years ago. So I am getting updated headshots. My kids would be like, who is that? No, thanks for having us. This is great. Really not a lot to add, except I think what we've learned over the last 2 years, and as everyone has already alluded to, it's something that we should have seen coming, was that we focus on workforce, we focus on these incidents as they pop up. But from a policy perspective, we have had policies that said buy in the United States, do these things. They had instructions, but the infrastructure wasn't there. So, it was one thing for the federal government and the president, whichever one that was, to say, you need to buy from the United States supplier. But when you don't know where they are, and you don't know, and you don't even can't negotiate. My audio is not good. Sorry, guys. Hang on a second. Is my audio bad? Okay. When you don't know where they are, it's really hard to buy from someone in the United States. And what we've learned in Colorado is most companies in Colorado don't know where the suppliers are around the corner. So one of the economic development policies, if we call it that, is really a strategy. In Colorado, economic development is local. We have an Office of Economic Development in the National Trade, but we all know that the drivers are in those local communities. So the key, what we're looking at from the manufacturer's edge, as being an EP center in the state of Colorado, is that our job is to work with you to really figure out what does that ecosystem look like, and to start mapping that ecosystem from the supply chain perspective and a workforce perspective to help those Colorado companies connect with each other, so that they can diversify their supply chain and they can position themselves to be able to make it out of the next natural disaster, the next logistical issue, the next pricing increase. So from a policy perspective, I look at it in the cybersecurity framework. We have to be able to identify, we have to be able to then protect or reduce our risk in supply chain. We have to be able to help those companies detect their issues, how they're going to respond, and then how they're going to recover. So from a policy perspective, investing in workforce is one of those things, because right, you cannot make things without people. We can automate a lot of things, but reshoring is one piece of that. And we have had an uptick in companies looking, and then Sustainment is one of those technologies that we want to use in Colorado to better connect those companies to each other. So really, it's about identifying what's already out there and then looking at your clusters. From a community perspective, what are those industry clusters? Do you even know who's in your backyard? If you ask Lockheed Martin, more than likely they can tell you they're tier 1s and possibly they're tier 2s, but they don't know who's tier 3, tier 4, and tier 5. How is someone else going to even know? And sometimes they don't even know if you're a tier 4 supplier, you're supplying to Lockheed Martin. So one of the things we're focused on from a manufacturer's edge perspective is helping them to understand that they need to have a handle on what their supply chain looks like from a raw materials perspective, and then they also need to know who they're selling to, because cybersecurity, workforce, these are all pieces that affect the supply chain. So we are seeing movement at the federal level now with the CHIPS Act. It's about bringing semiconductor chips back to the United States. There is an appropriation, an authorization in that bill for Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program to increase our funding to allow us to better serve companies in the state of Colorado and across the country. That hasn't been appropriated yet, so we're waiting on that. If Congress takes as much time as they normally do, it may be a while before we see any money, but we're hopeful that that will help us to reach more of those companies in your communities, because as Nico pointed out, Nico's amazing with data, how many of those companies in Colorado have less than 100 employees? And that's most of them. So really, we're talking about, connecting these communities of manufacturers to each other, and then working with other states in the region and in the country to connect them to other domestic suppliers. So the Colorado Manufacturing Network, which we will be officially launching at the EDCC conference in October, will start with that supplier platform with Sustainment and really sitting down with you and mapping your ecosystem, and then pivoting to mapping our workforce assets, mapping our other assets for small and medium-sized companies, because right now they don't know what they don't know. So if we're going to help them be resilient and prepare for that next issue, we need to help them understand how to identify and how to connect to those resources that they need to be ready. So I think there's nothing specific that I would say from a policy perspective at this point. It's really about the localization and knowing your community. Rob?
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, I think that wraps it up very well. I do want to, I believe, introduce our CEO, see too many letters here, all connected. Our new CEO, Glenn Plagins, probably someone that many of you know already, as a former member of the OEdit team. So Glenn, I want to see if you have any kind of wrap up before we take some questions and move forward with the rest of the panel.
Sure. I wanted to talk directly to the economic development community and just kind of talk what's in it for you and what we're working on at Manufacturer's Edge. We are aligning our services in a lot of ways to your business retention and expansion program. So Rob Newbold is new to our team. As he said, he's been on board for about 5 or 6 months. Increasing the product or the service offerings that we offer the manufacturers. We've added over 30 outside consultants since he's been on board, which is absolutely amazing. It's just super, quick work on his part, and offering a lot of them from the national, basically the national perspective or nationally, which has been great. It's something that Colorado's been missing. And then just letting everybody know that we're here to help within your communities. So we have regional directors. We have 5 of them in the state. We're here to help your communities get to your manufacturers and help them basically get not just, attached to the Colorado manufacturing network and the supply chain tool, but just everything holistically so that company can make more sense of what they're doing moving forward. And that's one of the big things that, we want to message going forward. We've launched a new brand about a month ago, and part of that new brand is not just the new look, but the new way of thinking. And one of the things that we're going to be building moving forward is a lot of the support mechanism for the economic development community. In the state of Colorado, manufacturing is a $25 billion industry. And what we want to do is we've got a huge opportunity right now. We're, working with our other ecosystem partners like CAMA. And what we're doing is bringing forward way more tools for our manufacturers and then way more things for our economic developers to leverage. With that, I have a request is how do you stay in the communications channels? Because a lot of the stuff can trickle out the next couple months. And then, as Jen said, we will be at EDCC talking about and digging deep into the Colorado Manufacturing Network and sponsoring the event with our partner Sustainment. The 2 requests are, if you don't follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on LinkedIn, because that's where we're going to be making our first announcements. And then the dig deeper announcements are going to be on our newsletter and at our new website at manufacturersedge.com. In the lower left corner, as you scroll down on every page, you can sign up for those 2 the newsletter and basically be ready for those 2 lines of communication. Those are our 2 major things, 2 major ways we communicate to our audience, and we just suggest get in there. And then the other thing is I know a lot of people on this call, so if you have any questions in here, you want to chat or whatever, just email me and look me up. If you go to our website, my email address is right there. We'd love to just chat about some of the things that we're doing, some of the ideas you might have, and the team, the same thing. I mean, Manufacturer's Edge, when you really put us in a room and you put us with our federal partners, it's huge. It's over 10,000 people in this network working for the benefit of our manufacturers on a day-to-day basis. So that's about it. Again, LinkedIn and the newsletter are 2 main communications channels. So follow those, and we'll keep you posted through those 2 mechanisms and the outreach that we're going to be doing. So thanks for having us.
Thank you, Glenn. All right, Kim, have we had any questions from the chat that we need to respond to? And then I have a few as well for our panel as we move forward.
I believe that we do have one question, and this one is for Glenn because he just recently came from OEdit, so I have a feeling he has the answer to this one. Does OEdit have a database of manufacturers in each county?
We do not. They do not. Nobody really does. It's really kind of an elusive thing. At Manufacturer's Edge, we know there's about 6,700 manufacturers in the entire state. We use Dun & Bradstreet information to kind of look and glean into that. One of the things we're doing with Sustainment through the supply chain tool is we're mapping that. So the data that we get as a map when we go forward with the Colorado Manufacturing Network and getting the clients in there, we'll be able to at some level share that with our economic development partners, and then work with our economic development partners to make sure that that's a more robust list and we actually identify all of them. The other thing to take into consideration too is we rely on NAICS codes. Not all companies that are manufacturing that you might even know in your community have the right NAICS code. So again, connect with us, get them on the platform, and we'll be demoing that over the course of the next couple months, and then at the EDCC conference, and that's going to be how we build this map.
So that's a good question, follow-up question, Glenn, and then I'll get to Rob's questions. But I just wanted to make sure that we were clear as to what our role is and when you will start to connect with us so that we know when to launch, when we're ready to because I know that a lot of our economic development professionals do know who at least their large manufacturers are, and maybe they're secondary, but we might have to get, some more help digging deeper into our community to find those third and fourth tier.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Sustainment's doing a lot of that work on the front end. They have full-time employees that are actually populating the platform right now. Those users on the platform, they need to claim their identity on the platform, and then that will give them a robust, a presence on the platform, things of that nature, so they're searchable, etc. The economic development community right now, we're working with 3 economic development organizations right now, kind of in what we call the beta phase. And in that beta phase, if we have time before the EDCC conference to expand beyond the 3, we'll start to expand beyond the 3 and reach out to some of the economic development communities before the October meeting. But really, at the October meeting is when we're really going to kick this thing into high gear and start to work with the individual economic development communities to get their manufacturers on there and to really understand the tool, how it's used, and how they can leverage it for their community.
And I think it's also important, and Jen mentioned this, or Glenn won, right? We have 5 RDs that are regional directors who are out there. If you get in touch with them, they're probably going to know a lot of those smaller manufacturers already. And if they don't, then they want to go with you to meet those manufacturers, because it is that collaborative approach that that is going to make the difference here. So, and in that vein, I just want to throw this question out to the panel, and I'll try and I'll pick one person to answer, and then others can chime in. As we think about the supply chain problem, how do we narrow that down to something manageable that both manufacturers and economic development organizations can do together? What are the tools or the activities or the places where collaboration can occur? I'll pick Brett to start that, and then we'll come back with maybe Nico or Mark.
I'm sorry, say again, Rob. So points of collaboration or how to get started?
Points of collaboration to break down this big problem into something that's manageable.
Yeah, I mean, again, at the end of the day, this is actually just about business owners finding new business owners and actually appreciating that the ecosystem is very dynamic and nuanced, right? So a lot of what we're trying to open up here and, looking at some of the case studies of what's happening in Texas and so on is this idea of, hey, I could bid for this opportunity, but let's say these are parts that require machining, and then they require finishing, and then they require heat treating. So a lot of actually what we're doing is we're helping companies almost, vertically integrate, but through partners here, so that they can access larger opportunities. And, so I think that there is I guess that there's an education piece, for those who are a little new to the manufacturing ecosystem of what, how all this works. And, we've actually have a team started a series of guides of what are these little processes and what are you talking about when plasma cutting intersects with other things and, and so on. And so, we do that. We also are working to integrate, stories about manufacturers specifically where they say, look, here are my lessons learned of what was actually helpful to me from an EDC or a support organization that actually helped me win business or helped me do something that increased my bottom line. So I think there's an immersion and education piece in this a little bit, but again, I think it just really does kind of start from a common operating picture of what the ecosystem looks like, which does, I see all the questions in chat, which are around how do we get started? How do we get these going? And that, those are the right questions actually, because I think, outreach and visibility is required to then apply, some of this connectivity and exposure, which leads to business growth and economic growth and, increased revenues and all the things that we get excited about. So not sure if that was helpful, but that's where I'd start.
Oh, that works. That's a good start. Just understanding, I think, what your local manufacturers actually do and what they produce and how they produce it is a really good start. Mark or Nico, any add there?
Rob, I'd build on Brett's answer when you talked about being immersed and being educated, and then I'd add another piece to that. Then communicating and sharing, right? If at least from an MEP perspective, it's about working with companies one-on-one and solving individual company problems and opportunities. But if we are partnered with the economic development community in a different way, if we're ultimately we're talking to the same companies and if we collectively understand what those companies are looking for, or asking for, or needing, or hoping to get, that we as economic developers, we kind of share that among ourselves. MEP Manufacturers Edge might not have all the answers all the time, just like some of the local economic development resources might not have all the answers all the time. But if we collectively keep our focus on what do the manufacturers need and what do the manufacturers want, and we can kind of communicate that and share that among each other to solve those problems, then I think we all collectively win.
Agreed. That's right on target. Jen, I see your head nodding. Anything you want to add there?
No, I completely agree. I think we have tasked our staff. Manufacturers Edge historically has done a lot of training, and we will always do training. But we have, as a new, relative, renewed organization, we look at ourselves as an economic development organization that serves the entire state. And specifically manufacturers. So we want to partner with you. And to the question in the chat, sorry, Kim, what's the price point? There is no cost. It is free to manufacturers. There is a revenue side of that, and Brett can correct me if I misstate this, but from the buying perspective, they're kicking the tires on a beta right now on a procurement side. So for those larger companies who they could probably be on the site in two different ways. One would be as a supplier, and that would be no cost to them. And the other side would be as a procurement, where they can specifically go out and put a project up on the site, and then with specific specs and designs and CAD drawings and all of that, and then look for suppliers in Colorado and beyond through that site. So there's no cost to manufacturers, also no cost to our economic development partners and resources. And back to what I said earlier about the Colorado Manufacturing Network, our goal is to work with you to map not just that supply chain, but those resources and get them up on this platform, and then start mapping. That's a further goal down the road, but mapping those resources to better help your companies to connect with what they need. It's just, I know it's really frustrating it happens everywhere. It's not uncommon that it's just, we don't know what we don't know. And I'll pick on Colorado School of Mines. They think they're going to be doing something around this, and they don't know that Colorado Springs is also doing it. And so, we're looking at it as to how do we connect those things to help you and help our companies take advantage of what's already being done.
Kim, I want to watch our time. We've got about 5 minutes left. Do you want me to take a couple more questions?
Yeah, there's one question from Trey. Again, it's going back to, can EDO start pre-populating some of the manufacturing entities in our communities so that we can help make it easier for the companies to claim and complete their profiles. So we could, be that resource for you to get that. I just don't know how that connection piece would work.
Yeah, so let me take a stab, and then Brett, you correct me as we go along. EDOs will have that opportunity when we get this fully announced and rolled out in October. That's part of the growth strategy of Sustainment's model and the way that we want to work with EDOs. In the short term, over the next 2 months, they have a specific strategy to start populating companies based on some information that we've shared and other information that they've gathered on the web. So you'll see a lot more companies in Colorado over the next 2 months. And Brett, you want to add anything to that?
No, that's right on. And again, so any company can go to our website, sustainment.tech, and in the top right corner, there's a sign up button, and it'll take probably 3 to 5 minutes to go to an onboarding flow to have a profile, and they'll take another 15 or 20 minutes if you want to add pictures and certifications and so on. And so, any company can do that anytime. But I also, again, I leave this to the Manufacturer's Edge crew to guide however you'd like this process here. But, we're also happy that if there are lists that run through Manufacturer's Edge that say, here are our companies that we'd like to make sure are accounted for, we're happy to work off those lists to pre-populate them as well.
Yep. Glenn mentioned there's 6,700 manufacturers, and we've shared some of those manufacturing names already with the team, and I know that they're building out those profiles as we speak. So EDOs will have that chance after we get everything fully announced to add even more, and that's the whole idea.
We have one question from Mark. He's used Manufacturer's Edge in the past for production line design. That was oriented towards lean manufacturing in a repetitive environment. Do you have training or education in lean materials management for low volume, high mix manufacturing to achieve rapid production deliveries and high inventory turns?
We do. Those are perfectly within our wheelhouse, both at the Manufacturer's Edge level as well as the national level. And so, Mark, we'd love to have one of our regional directors reach out to you and talk to you and learn more about what you need, because those are perfectly within our scope of services that we can provide. So I'd be glad to work with you on that.
Wonderful. All right, well, we are at our time. It's 11:28, so I do want to wrap us up. So first of all, I want everybody to use your Zoom emojis and clap and thank our moderator and our panelists today for coming to the table, to giving us this information, and really to bring us into the fold. I'm so excited. We have been needing something like this for so long that now we get to utilize it and be a part of this community to build our manufacturing supply chain in Colorado, and that is going to be our advantage, right? We are going to win over because we are a unified network of economic development professionals. So thank you for attending today, for putting this together for us, and I cannot wait for October to see 2.0 of how we're going to map out our supply chain. And that is also just a heads up, October is Manufacturing Month. So we're going to be helping celebrate Manufacturing Month along with our partners here at Manufacturer's Edge. Also, we can't close out today's event without acknowledging the important contribution of Colorado Workforce Development Council. They really do play an integral role in economic and workforce development and have been a key EDCC network player. Thanks goes to the council for all the workforce and all the workforce development folks that really do help us build out what we need in our economy. And they will be an integral part of this, the second part that we talked about of building out the workforce, because we can't ramp up our manufacturers without the workforce, right? A big thank you goes to our dedicated events and programming committee as well as our communications committee. They are the ones that are kind of in the background right now listening, and they're going to help us put together this thought leadership paper along with our team members that have helped bring the conference to us today. And again, a link to the recording, presentations, and follow-up resources and outcomes will be emailed to you early next week. The thought leadership paper we're hoping to be released in mid-October, along with so that it coincides with Manufacturing Month. And also, we are always trying to better our delivery for information. please take the survey that Bobby just dropped into the link for us or into the chat section. And that really does help us refine and better these deliveries of information. So again, you can find all of our upcoming events and programming by visiting our website, and Bobby's going to drop that link in there as well. So again, finally, thank you so much for being with us today, and have a great week, and we'll see you in Pueblo in October.